Hello everybody, this is Chaos with Chaos Esports Productions, bringing you tonight's Clan War. We've got Eternal Trainers going up against Team Elite here in this best of 7. Let's go ahead and introduce our players here on Belshir Vestige. Spawning in the lower right hand corner for Team Elite, it is going to be Nerd Slayer. And spawning in the upper left hand corners, in the red trunks, it is going to be Eternal Dreamer's Hardest. So, PVZ here on Belshir Vestige. We'll have to see how this all turns out. This is actually probably one of my favorite maps for this matchup, just because we get a little bit into the late game most of the time. By Belshir having this really accessible third base for the Protoss player. Protosses can generally take a very, very quick third and only have to kind of defend this main area, so we'll have to see whether or not we'll actually get there today. So, we do have a minor switch up. We were going to be playing Team 2 Pro, but obviously that fell through because apparently a lot of them live on the West Coast and are all at work, because it would be 5:48 around their time. So, we'll have to see how these two teams duke it out. So, it does look like Nerd Slayer's going to be going for pretty normal build so far. We'll have to see whether or not Hardest chooses to go for that hatch first, as he has already pulled down his drone. So, it does look like he's going to be playing more of a macro style. Now, the only issue with playing a heavy macro style, especially on this, going for this early hatchery tends to be a little bit of an issue, because if your opponent goes for a forge fast expand, he's going to have the ability to do a really easy cannon rush. Obviously drones would need to be pulled very, very hastily in order to deny that cannon rush. So generally speaking, you do see the spawning pool first, but it doesn't look like we're going to see any such shenanigans coming out of Nerd Slayer. Just going to be getting up his cybernetics core and continuing on his build with it. I'm assuming this is probably going to be a 1-gate expand, but we will have to see as he is pulling his probe. Let's see, that is currently slated to go to his opponent's base over here. So just looking to poke out, get a little bit of a scout. First zealot is actually out on the way, which is a little bit interesting. We'll have to see whether or not that... Okay, so he's not going to go ahead and cancel the zealot. A lot of times what you'll see is the zealot started to be produced as of just in case of an earlier pool, and then canceled at the very last second, so you can get this nexus up nice and early. So we'll have to So, choosing to go for a little bit more of a defensive style, waiting a little bit longer for his nexus, but overall, no hard, no foul. Mothership core is going to be out of the way. It's going to be a little bit behind the nexus, so he is going to have to wait a little bit of time in order for that photon overcharge to come down in case there is any early pressure. So a couple links going to pop out here and snatch this probe up. The probe more or less got a pretty good scout on everything that's going on. Small little pylon block coming out of Nerd Slayer. So that does look like this probe is potentially going to get taken down. We'll have to see. Yeah. Ready? Set? Couple pokes, maybe? I don't know. Anyways, Overlord is going to be scouting this natural, so Hardest is going to know exactly what's going on. So yeah, so far, pretty standard PVZ here on Belshir Vestige. Not seeing any more gas being mined, so he's going to play more of a like I said, definitely going for that more macro style play, just happily droning up, getting up his queens, and not really focusing on getting a whole lot of units so far. So the Overlord is going to scout exactly what's going down here. We do have 2 more gateways out on the way, so it does look like Nerd Slayer potentially could be putting on some pressure. The 4th gate is down. So, Proxy Pylon going over here on the right-hand side, a little bit further away from the natural than he would probably like, but obviously looks like Hardest already has kind of a little bit of an inkling that there could be something up. A couple more links being produced now just to make sure that he does have enough defenses to potentially take down anything if necessary, as he does see 2 more pylons being planted down to finish this wall off. Kind of an odd wall off. So... looks like he is going to be scouting out. He actually is scouting in the correct position for that pylon, but Those Zerglings are going to be denied for the time being. We'll have to see whether or not a couple more Spore Crawlers or Spine Crawlers are going to be put down just to get ready for this defense. So lots of Zealots coming in here, not really going to be seeing much at the third. We do have a pretty good Overlord Scout, pretty much getting a good timing of when the extra gas is going down, and looks like Hardcrest needs to get back in time in order to defend off these Zealots. He's going to get a pretty decent surround. A lot of Zealots versus not a whole lot of Lings, so Hardest definitely is going to need to back off here, try and do as much damage as he can with these Queens. The Queens are actually doing a lot of damage to these Mothership Core, and the Mothership Core is going to go down, so there is no recall available for Nerd Slayer. So at this point, it looks like the attack has been held off, but will Nerd Slayer continue on warping in? That is the question. So it does look like Nerd Slayer is posturing for another attack. Lings are coming in to meet these Zealots, and definitely not going to get a whole lot of damage done. So the Roach Warren is up, and I'm really surprised that Hardest really isn't producing that many units at this point. I mean, he's only got 8 more Lings on the way, his Lairs on the way, and he's focusing on +1 missile attacks. So as far as his production, he's only got 1 Roach out, which really isn't going to do too much. But actually, it looks like Nerd Slayer's going to go ahead and back off of this. I'm really not sure why, because he really has the advantage. I mean, the only thing that he saw was the single Spine Crawler. He got a poke at the Evo chamber, but other than that, he really didn't see anything that said that he could. I mean, he could have walked in there and just won with that. So definitely a little bit of a misread by Nerd Slayer, which is obviously not gonna fend out too well for him. So we do have Hallucinating Phoenix going in, getting a really good scout on everything. Does see the Hydra Den, as well as the Roach Warren in the double Evo chamber. So he's got a really good read on what's going on, has a good idea of what he's going to be up against. Hardest is going to be moving in here and actually going to scout all of these gateways going down here. So Hardest knows that there's something coming his way very, very soon. And the units of Nerd Slayer are going to be posturing out onto the field, trying to get as much damage done as possible. Nerd Slayer is going to scout this 4th base. Ooh, and a couple of these Overlords are out of position. This could potentially be very, very bad for Hardest. We'll have to see whether or not Hardest is going to choose to defend this at all. Obviously, since there's nothing here, I'm going to say that he's probably going to have to abandon it. There's really nothing he can do. We do have a whole bunch of Roaches and Lings already out on the field. And it looks like Hardest is getting ready to potentially defend off this attack. Nice little units doing their thing. So far, it looks like at this point just Immortals are being produced, and more Warpins are coming in here at the front. So we'll have to see whether or not Hardest does have enough units to defend this. A handful of Hydras are out on the field. +1 is already done, so versus the 0-0 of Nerd Slayer, we'll have to see whether or not there is enough. There are a ton of Zealots here. We'll have to see whether or not Hardest can get a good enough engagement. Zerglings are going in, more or less getting ripped apart by all of these Zealots. And with this Roach counterattack at the back, there just simply isn't enough units. And Nerd Slayer could potentially walk into this for a very, very clean victory here in game number 1. We'll have to see whether or not Hardest can't hold it. The Hydras are doing a fair amount of damage. The Mothership Core is going down, and I think it looks like Hardest might have just enough units to deal with this. All of the units of Hardest are backing up, trying to get into a good enough position to deal as much damage as possible to these Zealots. Zealots are going down left and right, and it looks like with the rest of these Zealots going down, it looks like Hardest might actually have enough to deal with this. And it looks like Nerd Slayer is going to have to back off of this. Some interesting micro there by by Nerd Slayer. The Port Prism is going to back off, and it looks like Hardest is actually going to be on the offensive potentially here. We'll have to see whether he chooses to be aggressive or not. Obviously, the production tab for Nerd Slayer is a little bit lacking here. Definitely needs to start focusing on getting up his tech as he lays down his robotics spay, and also getting his upgrades, because he does know that he is already very behind in upgrades, as 1-1 has already completed for Hardest. So we'll have to see whether or not Nerd Slayer can get back into this. Obviously, 3rd base just now going down for Nerd Slayer, so his economy is going to be a little bit behind of Hardest, since the 3rd base of Hardest has been up for at least 2 or 3 minutes now. We do have a small little drop coming into here to the back of the base. We'll have to see how much damage this can get done. Mortals are dropping down, trying to get focused down these queens. The first queen will fall. Zergling's coming in, trying to do as much damage as possible, but some very, very decent micro, and the War Prism is going down. Both of these Immortals are going down, reducing the amount of tech units that Nerd Slayers is going to have out here on the field, and it's going to be very difficult for him to get back into that upper echelon of tech. Obviously, we do have one Immortal out on the field with Colossus production on the way, and the third base is nearly complete, but will he have enough time to get out enough units? We will have to find out. Looks like Queens are coming in this engagement, so we'll have to see whether or not these transfuses will be enough to push through Nerd Slayer's defenses. Now, Nerd Slayer's got a pretty strong army at this point. Charges is still yet to be complete, so he is lacking that upgrade, but we will have to see if there's enough here. Looks like Zerglings are coming in, trying to get a good angle to get back and deal damage to the Stalkers and the Immortals. But with the Zerglings attacking the Zealots are definitely going to fight very, very efficiently with this. But with the amount of DPS with the Hydralisks are doing so much damage, taking out a lot of these Zealots. And once the Zealots are down, the Hydralisks can't focus down the Colossus. There just seems to be too much units here for Hardest, and it looks like he's going to start to focus down the third. So Hardest's army is going to be in a very, very good position to take down this third. Now the question of the day is, will Nerd Slayer be able to take this engagement without losing too many units? Obviously, he will have a couple of force fields to do a good amount of parting from the army of Hardest, but it looks like Hardest is just going to go ahead and back off. The damage has been done to the economy, and obviously the army is more or less pretty much minimal. Just a handful of Stalkers with a lot of sentries and just a few more Zealots being warped in, so these Queens are clearly having a hard time off a creep. They're just like, man, it's so slow out here. So we'll have to take a look at Hardest's base. We have a Spire going down as well as the Infestation Pit, so it does look like he is going to be teching up 2 Hive probably in the next minute or so. So we'll have to keep an eye on what tech path he chooses, if he chooses to go for Ultralisk. And wow, Hardest has been expanding significantly. His 4th base is already up, 5th base is on its way, and Nerd Slayer's got some big ground to cover. Obviously, I believe the range attack is now complete, but still only on +1 ground weapons, which is definitely hurting him significantly, as his opponent is already on 2-2. And as far as production, he just doesn't have enough money. He hasn't had his 3rd expansion up for nearly as long as Hardest has, and Hardest, like I said, is already working on getting up his 4th and 5th expansion. So it's definitely going to be very, very difficult for Nerd Slayer to come back from this, but we'll have to see whether or not he can pull this one out of the bag. But we do have to keep in mind that as time goes on, Hardest is going to have a very, very big bank, 12 Corruptors on the way, definitely going to have plenty of firepower to deal with these Colossus very, very quickly, and I think things are looking really, really grim for Nerd Slayer at this point. He's trying to Chrono Boost out these upgrades as quickly as possible, but it's going to be very, very difficult for him to do so with his opponent already being fully maxed out. So, looks like Hardest is just focusing down the scouting that his opponent has. Obviously, Nerd Slayer's got a pretty good idea of where his opponent is, has seen the 4th base already, probably has an inkling that the 5th base is on its way, but we will have to see. I really think Storm is going to be a very, very crucial key to him pulling this victory out if he wants any hope of doing that. Templar Archive still has not been put down just yet, so he's definitely going to need to start thinking about getting out those Archons, getting out those High Templars, and being in a good position to take an engagement with this army. So it does look like Hardest is going to come in here and try and do a little bit of damage, but Corruptors are coming in, trying to do as much damage to the Colossus as possible. The Colossus down is going down very, very rapidly. All of the Colossus are going to be focused down, and Hardest really needs to focus on not losing too many of these Corruptors, because obviously he doesn't want to have to deal with the Colossus in the later games. Does Hardest have enough? And Nerd Slayer is going to go ahead and call GG here in game number 1, making the scores 1-0 Eternal Dreamers.